I had just acquired powers akin to those of a creator, yet the very next day, the hospital diagnosed me with terminal stomach cancer. In order to survive, I transformed my family's old farm into a sandbox world. I accelerated the evolution and progression of life, hoping to create a civilization capable of curing cancer. As the ancient people explored my square sandbox, they were shocked to discover that this world was round above and square below, and that colossal giants, towering thousands of feet tall, existed. Whenever the civilization's development failed to meet my expectations, I would overturn everything and start anew. I would always grant the heroes of each civilization an opportunity to ask me one question. Whenever they asked how many days it took me to create the world, I would recall the scene of myself digging and building the sandbox, and I would answer that it took me exactly 7 days to create this land. Thus, the tale of the creator crafting all things in just 7 days spread across this land. Civilizations thrived and fell, generation after generation, in my sandbox. Yet who would have thought that all these splendid and glorious civilizations began with a single spore? In the beginning, I constructed an artificial shallow pond within the 100-acre sandbox of my orchard, and I turned it into an ocean by replicating the exact salinity of seawater. I introduced countless insectoid spores into this central ocean and accelerated the rate of cell division by 10,000 times. In other words, for every day that passed in reality, 10,000 years would elapse within the sandbox. Even so, it wasn't until the 5th day, 50,000 years had passed, that these single-celled organisms began evolving into plankton. The central ocean began to turn visibly murky, so I quickly implemented genetic restrictions to limit the size of the spore creatures. After all, my sandbox was only so big, I couldn't allow these organisms to evolve too large. On the afternoon of the 6th day, after the transformations of the previous 5 days, multicellular organisms finally began to appear in the waters of the ancient ocean. In just a few minutes, like a time-lapse nature documentary, these planktonic species were born and perished within seconds, only to give rise to the next generation. As the sun set, just as I had expected, the sandbox world experienced its first mass extinction. The 12-hour night meant the loss of sunlight for what equated to 5,000 years. Vast swathes of aquatic plants withered and sank to the ocean floor, leaving the world under the darkness devoid of life. My sandbox environment was far too small. According to Darwin's theory of evolution, the limited biological population wouldn't be sufficient to evolve a new species capable of adapting to the environment. But then I remembered the resilient insectoid single-celled organisms in my ocean, and I couldn't help but look forward to the surprises they might bring me. Half an hour after the moonlight began to spill across the surface, a faint blue hue appeared amidst the sea of decaying plant matter. It was a tiny blue plant, no bigger than an ant, with delicately shaped leaves resembling trees. To my astonishment, despite losing direct sunlight, this plant had adapted its photosynthesis to rely on the faint, almost negligible light of the moon, barely clinging to survival. Filled with awe, I named this plant blue silver grass. After surviving the first mass extinction, this plant began evolving rapidly, generation after generation, in just a matter of seconds. Through natural selection, the blue silver grass adapted frantically to the nocturnal environment. It developed angular structures and disc-like shapes, spreading across the surface of the ocean like lotus leaves, allowing it to absorb moonlight over a wide area from above the yard. An hour later, having undergone tens of thousands of generations of evolution, it began to diversify into various branches. It even split into 2 distinct species. One group of blue silver grass continued evolving to absorb moonlight, further enhancing its efficiency in converting lunar energy. The other group of blue silver grass astonishingly turned carnivorous, preying on their own kind. By absorbing moonlight, they emitted a faint glow to lure other blue silver grass to float closer, only to devour them. Observing this, I couldn't help but marvel at the resilience and wonder of life. Survival of the fittest in its purest form. After surviving the first mass extinction, this lone aquatic plant astonishingly developed its own diverse civilization within the dark ocean. A sudden thought struck me: why not record the countless epochs of the sandbox's evolution using an era calendar, just like Earth's geological timeline? So I quickly grabbed a black notebook and began documenting the evolution of the sandbox. On Earth, the Cambrian period marked the explosion of life, becoming the origin epoch for all life forms, paving the way for dinosaurs, humans, and countless beasts. But in my sandbox, the explosion of life faced 5,000 years of darkness. And so, I named this epoch the Dark Cambrian. Excited, I opened the first page of the black notebook and wrote Dark Cambrian. The world suddenly changed. The sun set and the moon rose, plunging the world into a long, 5,000-year darkness. 99% of the ocean's life forms perished, leaving only the blue-silver grass, absorbing the faint moonlight, as the sole surviving species. In this dark ocean, blue-silver grass became the dominant species of the epoch. I gazed at the pond, now transformed into a sea of life, quietly filled with anticipation. According to Earth's evolutionary history, marine plants emerged first, followed by the proliferation of marine animals. What kind of oceanic creatures would my Zerg cells evolve into? I stayed up all night, waiting for dawn. When the seventh day finally began, the ocean didn't evolve animals as I had envisioned. Instead, it faced yet another catastrophic mass extinction. At the moment of sunrise, the various blue-silver grass species that had thrived through the night began to wither rapidly. Having adapted to the faint moonlight, they were suddenly exposed to the intense rays of direct sunlight, as if being scorched, sinking into the ocean depths. In an instant, the blue-silver grass faced mass extinction on a vast scale. This was the demise of life. In the long epochs of evolution, measured in hundreds of millions of years, countless species rose and fell, a grand, eternal epic of the vast planet. By the afternoon, a faint trace of blue gradually revived from the withered plants, a star-shaped blue-silver grass. It underwent a mutation and evolution, successfully escaping this round of mass extinction. Under the scorching sun, it transformed, reborn from the ashes. To better adapt to the intense sunlight, it began reproducing generation after generation. In just a few minutes, this blue-silver grass perished and reproduced countless generations. It gradually shifted from its original blue hue, eventually transforming into a field of black and blue stars imbued with a mysterious aura. The mass extinction of seaweed species marked both destruction and an opportunity for weaker species to rise. Throughout the entire ocean, no other species competed with it for survival. This blue-silver grass began reproducing rapidly. Watching this unfold, I was filled with awe and named this particular variant purple star grass. I turned to the second page of the black notebook and began documenting the age of radiance. Heaven and earth underwent a dramatic shift, moonlight gave way to sunlight, and the scorching sun dominated the sky for 5,000 years. The once dominant blue-silver grass, which had survived the age of darkness, faced mass extinction. Among them, a single lineage, the purple star grass, rose to prominence, becoming the ruler of this era and the protagonist of the Age of Radiance. Having endured the scorching sun of the day, the seventh night began to fall. The purple star grass continued to thrive peacefully in the ocean, having adapted to withstand the relentless cycle of 5,000 years of alternating sunlight and moonlight. At the same time, with its rapid reproduction and iterations, more aquatic plants evolved. Through photosynthesis, the oxygen levels in the seawater began to rise significantly, creating conditions suitable for the emergence of marine animals. Soon, the single-celled organisms in the ocean of the sandbox world began to evolve. The first to appear was a group of black-shelled creatures, resembling Earth's ancient Paleozoic marine species, the trilobites. Thus, marine animals officially entered the stage of the evolutionary era. The moment I saw animals emerge, a gratified smile finally appeared on my face. Carrying the exhaustion of staying awake for an entire day and night, I returned to my room and collapsed into sleep. When I woke up, it was already the 8th day of the Spore Evolution Sandbox's creation. I discovered that some marine animals, unsatisfied with the fierce competition in the ocean, had begun to gradually evolve toes. This marked the transition of some creatures into amphibians, starting their life on the desolate shores. I quickly turned to the page following the Guangwu era in my black notebook and recorded the third epoch, which I named the Era of Renewal. During the Era of Renewal, an explosion of animal species occurred. The first wave of marine animals ushered in an age of biological prosperity, with countless species competing for dominance. Invertebrates, relying on their pseudoshells, temporarily ruled the oceans as the epoch's overlords, but their reign was not destined to last long. Vertebrates emerged, defeating the invertebrates with their superior agility. They became the dominant species of the Era of Renewal, crawling out of the oceans to reign over a long and transformative epoch. After finishing these notes, I quietly closed the black notebook. On Earth, the epochs are known as the Cambrian, Ordovician, and Silurian. In my world, they are the Era of Darkness, the Era of Light, and the Era of Renewal. Although my initial spores are on the verge of evolving into terrestrial creatures, the evolution of intelligent beings remains an unknown number of long epochs away. Suddenly struck by a whimsical idea, I decided to have some fun. I cut my hand and let a single drop of blood fall into the sandbox. If some of the creatures in the ocean absorbed my genes, Could they rapidly evolve into humanoid intelligent beings? However, since this idea was incredibly bold, I decided to proceed cautiously and experiment with other genes first to evolve intelligent creatures. I went out to the zoo and, under the pretense of a university project, purchased a vial of gorilla blood. I went out to the zoo and, under the pretense of a university project, purchased a vial of gorilla blood. If I hadn't restricted their reproduction range, these creatures might have caused a species invasion on Earth. I stepped into this world and eventually selected a creature shaped like a beetle. I released them into a brand new experimental field only 1 square meter in size, injected them with gorilla blood, and accelerated the flow of time within the field. Survival of the fittest. Those that couldn't withstand the blood rejection died, with tens of millions of beetle species perishing in just 2 days. From the surviving beetle population, I selected a small group with the most successful blood fusion and named them insect apes. The insect apes closely resemble humans in appearance, but unlike humans, they have a round shell-like armor on their backs. It took me a full 2 days of experimentation to successfully create the insect ape species. In the Orchard's miniature sandbox, the equivalent of 20,000 years has passed. Powerful species have begun to emerge, with towering trees reaching the skies. The birth of numerous giant creatures signifies that the sandbox has officially entered a Jurassic-like era of dinosaurs. Among them, the largest is an upright beast with blue dorsal fins on its back. Its size has already reached the limit I set, equivalent to that of a cat. For the insect apes, which are only the size of ants, this creature's size is no different from Godzilla. I released the experimental insect-ape hybrids into a lush, tree-surrounded canyon on the southern side of the sandbox. I wanted to observe how they would survive in such an era. At the same time, I adjusted the sandbox's time flow to 100 years per day. Early the next morning, I hurried to the sandbox to observe the group of insect apes, eager to see how far their civilization had progressed. To my delight, these insect apes had already formed primitive tribal communities and even developed a rudimentary language and culture.